For several months, astronomers had assured us that the approaching interstellar object, dubbed 3I Atlas, would be nothing more than a spectacular flyby, skimming past Mars and vanishing into the cosmic void. However, the cosmos often defies expectations. The most advanced eye in the void, the James Webb Space Telescope, has recently delivered data that has flipped the narrative on its head. The trajectory of 3I Atlas has shifted, and scientists are now whispering the one thing no one wanted to hear: it might collide with Mars. 3I Atlas was first spotted on July the 1st, traveling at speeds never before recorded for an inbound object, nearly 87 kilometers per second relative to the Sun. It crosses the Earth-Moon distance in under 80 minutes. But what stunned scientists wasn't its velocity, it was its behavior. Comets typically slow, fragment, or stabilize as they approach the inner system. But 3I Atlas began accelerating, subtly but consistently. And even more disturbing, its trajectory began tightening. Slight course corrections became evident, and the object's coma, its surrounding halo of gas and dust, doubled in brightness within weeks. Spectral analysis revealed intense spikes in ultraviolet energy and CO2 outgassing at rates never seen before in any comet. It was acting less like a drifting chunk of frozen rock and more like a guided missile. And that's when Webb's deep field sensors caught something that changed everything. Rhythmic pulses coming from the tail, not chaotic jets from sunlight melting ice, but deliberate thrusts in perfect 17-minute intervals. A pattern, a signal, a maneuver. As Webb, Gemini South and NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory continued tracking the object, the numbers started telling a terrifying story. What was once a near miss had become something far more dangerous. A revised impact distance of just 1.95 million kilometers from Mars. A hair's breadth on the cosmic scale. And worse still, simulations showed that even 10 kilometers per second of added velocity, a fraction of what's already being measured in those gas pulses, could be enough to shift its path into a direct hit. This level of control is unheard of in natural bodies. It's as if 3I Atlas is using its own outgassing as microthrusters, adjusting its approach like a spacecraft would. Even more disturbing, those thrusts are perfectly aligned with the planet's orbital plane. Scientists aren't just tracking an object anymore. They're watching it aim. The window for impact keeps narrowing. Between September 19th and 30th, any single outburst could be the one that pushes it over the edge. It's no longer just amateur theorists or sci-fi enthusiasts sounding the alarm. Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb and his team have published a paper proposing something bold. 3I Atlas may be an engineered probe. The data backs them up. Radar bounces from the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter and Goldstone antennas returned metallic echoes, not the soft watery signatures of typical comets. Inside sources from NASA describe the radar reflections as unlike anything we've ever seen. Add to that the green needle-like streams seen in amateur high-exposure images. 3 glowing beams converging toward Mars, pulsing in sync with the exhaust vents, and the picture becomes undeniable. This object is not behaving naturally. Loeb suggests a scenario where 3I Atlas could be deliberately targeting Mars to crash, or worse, to deliver something. Probes, signals, spores, whatever it is, it's not a coincidence. Mars is being approached with surgical intent, and humanity is caught watching an operation we barely understand unfold before our eyes. What happens if it hits? The answer is almost incomprehensible. With a mass estimated at 10 billion tons and a speed of 57 kilometers per second relative to Mars, an impact would unleash more than 2 million megatons of energy. That's thousands of times the most powerful nuclear detonation in Earth's history. The crater would be 60 kilometers wide, 5 kilometers deep, and would scatter debris across Mars' orbit, some of which could be ejected into interplanetary space. And yes, that means some of it could eventually reach Earth. But the consequences go far beyond just rock and dust. Mars is home to dozens of scientific assets, rovers, orbiters, experiments searching for life, climate records spanning decades. An impact wouldn't just destroy machines. It would erase decades of research, blind communication arrays, and possibly ignite contamination events we are wholly unprepared for. ESA, Roscosmos, CNSA, and JAXA have all initiated planetary defense discussions, not against an alien fleet, but against a single object behaving just a little too much like a vehicle. For years, scientists have speculated that Mars once had life, and perhaps still harbours it deep beneath its rusty surface. Subsurface lakes, dormant microbes, ancient ecosystems locked beneath permafrost. It's one of the primary reasons we've sent so many rovers, orbiters and landers. But if 3I Atlas strikes, all of that becomes a biological unknown. The extreme heat of impact wouldn't just vaporize the surface. It would crack open the deeper layers of Martian crust, exposing reservoirs we've never reached. And if 3I Atlas carries organic molecules, or worse, synthetic biology embedded in its outcast trails, the fusion of Earth-independent evolution with Martian biology could result in genetic contamination on a planetary scale. Some biologists call this panspermia in reverse, not life spreading from Mars to Earth, but life being seeded into Mars. Deliberately, it raises a terrifying question. What if the goal was never destruction? What if the object is a delivery system, and Mars is the incubator? As 3I Atlas approached its closest point to Mars, the James Webb telescope locked onto the object for one final ultra-deep scan. The result was classified for 48 hours before a portion was released to the public, but leaks from within the Webb project tell a much darker story. NurseBeck and MIRI instruments detected traces of synthetic polymers, molecules that resemble Earth-made plastics and carbon nanotubes intermixed with natural gases. These aren't the kinds of structures that form in vacuum or during cometary heating. These are engineered materials. Webb's spectrographs also picked up persistent isotopic anomalies, notably in carbon and hydrogen, matching no known solar system object. In short, 3I Atlas contains things that should not exist in space, and all of it is heading straight toward a planet that still might be alive. Webb's data was shared privately with major space agencies. Emergency task forces were convened, not because we could stop it, but because we were running out of time to figure out what it really is. As panic grew, NASA made a surprising move: silence. The usual press releases stopped. The telemetry feeds from Perseverance and Tianwen-1 showed gaps. Questions about potential impact scenarios were redirected. Something had changed, and then, in a classified transmission later leaked by an internal whistleblower, a phrase appeared: "Impact protocol initiated." What does that mean? No one knows for sure, but insiders claim a series of encrypted signals were sent from Earth-based stations to all functioning Mars equipment. Curious, considering there's no known method to deflect or intercept 3I Atlas. Unless, of course, the purpose of those signals wasn't to protect Mars, but to prepare it. If 3I Atlas is an intelligent system, even semi-autonomous, it may be reacting to energy signatures, orbital beacons, or encoded pulses. And if Earth just turned those systems on, we may have just confirmed we're listening. Worse, we may have just confirmed we're responding. And whatever intelligence is behind this object, if any, now knows that we're aware. A team of cryptographers at the SCDI Institute did something no one had considered. They took the current trajectory, time of closest approach, velocity and gravitational vectors, data points known by every astronomer on Earth, and translated them into binary. Then they applied standard compression algorithms used in deep space messaging. What emerged was more than just random data. It was structured, repeating. It contained a series of numerical intervals that correspond to atomic numbers: 6, 8, 14, 26, carbon, oxygen, silicon, iron. The building blocks of both life and machines, but interspersed were prime number countdowns and spacings consistent with recursive messaging protocols. In short, the entire flight path of 3I Atlas may be a signal in motion. A message not delivered through radio, but through behavior, through timing, through presence. This would mean we aren't simply observing a trajectory toward Mars. We're witnessing a communicative event, and the impact window itself is part of the message. If it strikes, that's a sentence. If it misses, that's another. And either way, the answer is already written in the stars. As the projected impact path narrows, planetary scientists notice a chilling coincidence. 3I Atlas's updated trajectory crosses a narrow corridor that passes directly above Elysium Planitia, a geologically young region of Mars known for its unusually symmetrical surface features. Satellite imagery reveals concentric ridges, spiral-like flows, and formations that eerily mimic Fibonacci patterns. These weren't new, but what caught everyone's attention was the fact that the exact vector of 3I Atlas's descent aligns with a central depression, a perfectly circular basin less than 3.5 kilometers wide. No known impact origin, no volcanic residue, but perfectly centered within this basin was a deposit of crystalline silicates with refractive properties not found anywhere else on Mars. When hit by solar radiation, they emit brief pulses of infrared, light in regular intervals. Most dismissed this as a geological curiosity, but now scientists are asking, was this basin a random feature or a beacon, a rendezvous point? And if so, who set the coordinates? Just as James Webb locked back onto 3I Atlas from its alternate tracking point, an unexpected anomaly was observed. Behind the main body of the object, not physically attached but trailing at a consistent 007 astronomical units, was a secondary shadow. It wasn't a debris field, it wasn't gas, it was something darker. Radar couldn't detect it, infrared couldn't warm it. But photometric analysis showed a sharp drop in light that moved in perfect unison with 3I Atlas as if tethered by some invisible force. This shadow maintained an exact distance unperturbed by gravity or acceleration, and when visualized in polar coordinates, it formed a perfect orbital trace. Something was following 3I Atlas, not escorting, not hurting, but mirroring. The speculation exploded. Was it a secondary object, a drone, a gravitational echo, or something else entirely? A field, a memory, a protocol. For the first time, researchers began to consider the idea that 3I Atlas may not be the main actor in this cosmic event, but simply the carrier of something more elusive. With all eyes now on the projected impact date, an even more unsettling pattern emerged. When scientists laid out the entire trajectory of 3I Atlas and its closest approaches to the Sun, Earth and Mars, they found that each alignment fell on astronomically significant moments: September 23rd, October 5th, November 11th. These dates match not just seasonal equinoxes and transits, but rare gravitational synchronizations that occur in cycles of 54 years. In fact, the last time all three inner planets were in similar orbital positions during a comet's passage was the Tunguska event in 1908. This synchronicity sent shockwaves through the scientific community. How could a random interstellar object arrive at such astronomically significant moments? Unless it wasn't random, unless it was timing itself, as if following a clock not built by human hands. This wasn't celestial coincidence, it was a pattern, and patterns in space are always the signature of design. One final revelation pushed the conversation into a realm once considered taboo in mainstream science: consciousness in motion. A neurocosmology team at Princeton, studying neural synchronization patterns under deep meditative states, noticed something extraordinary. When subjects were exposed to the pulsation frequencies emitted by 3I Atlas's light curve, particularly the 17-minute gas vent intervals, their brainwave activity synchronized, not just in one subject but across multiple in different rooms, isolated and unaware. This isn't just resonance, this is neurological entrainment, as if the signal wasn't only mechanical but cognitive, and if it can affect us from across millions of kilometers. What does that say about its origin? Is it possible that 3I Atlas isn't a rock, isn't a spacecraft, but a thought moving through the universe like a seed of awareness? A message you don't read, but feel. Something that activates when heard. Something that becomes part of you the moment you understand it. If that's true, then the impact on Mars, whether physical or not, may be just a symptom. The real event may already be happening inside us. As fears surrounding the potential impact escalated, a quiet group of archaeoastronomers began cross-referencing 3I Atlas's trajectory with ancient sky maps, records not just from Western observatories, but from Babylonian, Mayan, and Tibetan cosmology scrolls. What they found defied belief. A pattern known as the flame serpent appeared across cultures, describing a celestial body that descends from the outer dark, curves unnaturally near the sun, and aims for the red god Mars. The pattern repeated in statues, carvings, and even cave etchings, each depicting the same sinuous path. But one set stood out, a pre-Incan calendar stone from Tiahuanaco, showing 4 radiating lines from Mars after the comet's descent. When processed through photogrammetry, the lines matched Webb's projected debris dispersion pattern in the event of a Mars impact. What does this mean? That somehow someone saw this coming, not in this century, but thousands of years ago. It suggests that 3I Atlas isn't merely passing through history. It might be history repeating itself, and Mars may not be the target. It may be the trigger. Then something utterly unexpected happened. The ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter, quiet for days due to power conservation, detected a spike in xenon isotopes in the upper Martian atmosphere. At first, scientists assumed it was solar radiation, but the composition was all wrong. This wasn't being added from above, it was rising from below, more specifically, from deep fissures near Cerberus Fossae, one of the most geologically unstable regions on Mars. Seismic activity spiked, temperature readings rose by 3 degrees Kelvin in the subsurface layers, and in a twist that left the scientific community in stunned silence, magnetometer readings detected a weak but structured magnetic pulse, one that repeated every 17 minutes, the same interval as 3I Atlas's gas emissions. This was no longer a question of if the object would impact. It became a question of whether Mars was already preparing for it, as if the planet wasn't being threatened, but being activated. Something inside the crust, dormant for millennia, had just begun to stir. With every passing hour, the idea of impact became less of a physical event and more of a temporal one. The Webb team noticed that light fluctuations from 3I Atlas were no longer consistent with cometary spin. Instead, they followed a recursive, layered timing sequence. 7 pulses, pause, 3 pulses, pause, 13 pulses, and so on. These numbers weren't random. When grafted together, they created a Fibonacci-based spiral, one often associated with organic growth, memory and coating, and even human DNA coiling. Mathematicians and cryptographers joined forces to decipher it and landed on a disturbing hypothesis. The 3-eye atlas isn't just transmitting time, it's synchronizing. The countdown, it turns out, isn't to the impact moment, it's to resonance, a convergence of energy, orbit and consciousness. And if this countdown ends, it might not bring an explosion, but a shift in perception, or perhaps even in the very framework of reality as we know it. In the final 72 hours before projected impact, a signal was detected. Low frequency, infrasonic, inaudible to human ears, but unmistakable in its waveform. It wasn't coming from space. It wasn't even bouncing off Mars. It was originating from under Alimpedia, the largest volcano in the solar system. This area, long thought geologically dead, suddenly emitted a structured harmonic frequency, captured independently by orbiters from ESA, CNSA, and NASA. The signal matched no known natural phenomena, but when isolated and visualized as a spectrogram, it formed a spiral, a mirror of the same waveform emitted by 3-eye atlas during its closest approach to the Sun. The scientific community fell silent. What does it mean when a planet responds to an object before it even arrives? Is Olympus Mons merely echoing, or is it communicating? Has Mars been waiting for this exact moment? And more importantly, if this is Mars waking up, what happens when it finally opens its eyes? As the final hours ticked by, a curious discovery emerged from a forgotten dataset. An old thermal scan from the Mars Odyssey orbiter, taken nearly 2 decades ago. It showed a faint heat signature beneath the surface of Utopia Planitia, dismissed at the time as solar reflection noise. But when the same region was rescanned following the 3-eye atlas approach, the heat pattern had not only returned, it had grown, and now matched the shape of an ancient glyph carved into the stone walls of the D&M fosse. The glyph, barely visible to the human eye, depicted a descending spiral colliding with a circle, and what appeared to be 2 planetary spheres aligned at the moment of contact. The implications were staggering. Mars may hold a memory, not just of geology, but of an encoded celestial past. What if Mars isn't just a planet? What if it's a recording device, and 3-eye atlas is the playback key? Then something impossible occurred. High-resolution imagery from ESA's Mars Express captured movement in the dust field south of Noctis Labyrinthus. Not wind, not rover activity, something rising, a pattern forming in the sand. 2 perfect concentric ovals expanding outward, as if carved from beneath. Over a period of 4 hours, the shapes extended and shifted until they formed an unmistakable image, and tilted exactly 23.5 degrees, Earth's axial tilt. The symbolism was overwhelming, an eye watching us or a mirror showing us ourselves. Scientists scrambled for answers, but none came. Mars had just blinked, not metaphorically, not poetically, physically, deliberately. Something beneath the surface was not only aware, but aware of us, of our geometry, of our orientation, and most disturbingly, of our signal, as if this entire event had been anticipated, perhaps even requested, long before our species ever existed. In one of the last readings before signal blackout, the James Webb Space Telescope performed a spectral breakdown of the molecular trail left by 3-eye atlas. Among the volatile organics and carbon chains was something that sent ripples through every astrobiology lab on Earth. A repeating strand of nucleobase sequences eerily similar to RNA, not exact, object, not Earth-based but unmistakably structured for replication, a foreign form of prebiotic information embedded in the vapor drifting across space, and as scientists began mapping it out, a horrifying posse. Ability, it was not just biological, it was responsive. Portions of the strand mirrored human-designed encryption keys. Others resembled known musical intervals, as if the molecule itself was designed to interact with intelligence, to respond to interpretation. This was no passive cometary dust, it was a living code engineered not to survive space, but to transmit through it. Life not as cells, but as language. As 3i Atlas entered its final trajectory arc, the global astronomy network mapped one last alignment. Mars, Earth, and the Sun would briefly form a perfect straight line, with 3i Atlas poised to intersect the axis at the precise moment of solar transit. But this wasn't just an orbital coincidence. The projection matched ancient megalithic alignments found on Earth, Stonehenge, Nabdaplia, Teotihuacan, all pointing to the same triad of celestial angles. For millennia, humans had unknowingly built monuments in preparation for this very configuration, and now the alignment was about to repeat, not as myth, but as mechanism. Mars, the red witness, Earth, the awakened observer, the Sun, the eternal source, and 3i Atlas, not an object, not a rock, but a keystone falling into the lock of planetary memory. The final position is not about destruction, it's about completion, and once it aligns, something will change. Not out there, but in here. We looked at the sky and thought we saw a comet, a rogue rock, a wandering fragment from some forgotten corner of the galaxy. We called it 3i Atlas. We tracked its numbers, we mapped its arc, we convinced ourselves it was random. But what the James Webb telescope revealed wasn't randomness. It was ritual. This object didn't just arrive, it performed. It aligned, it responded, and as it crossed the solar system, every planet it passed began to whisper back. Signals, pulses, alignments, codes. Mars didn't just react, it remembered, as if this wasn't its first encounter, as if this moment had been scripted into the bones of the planets, the dust of the craters, the pulse of gravity itself, and now, with one final maneuver, 3i Atlas has taken position, not to destroy, but to complete something, a pattern, a countdown, a convergence. Mars may be the stage, but Earth, we are the audience, and we were never meant to be passive observers. We were always part of the design. Every telescope we built, every signal we sent, every theory we mocked, all of it was heard. The final impact may not be physical, it may not leave a crater, but it has already begun to reshape what we thought we knew about Mars, about life, about ourselves. Because in the end, 3i Atlas didn't come from Mars, it came for our attention. And now that it has it, we have to ask, what happens next? Subscribe, because this story is far from over. Turn on notifications, because what comes next won't be televised. Share this video with someone who still thinks we're alone. And tell us in the comments, do you think 3i Atlas was an accident or an invitation? Because maybe, just maybe, Mars isn't about to be impacted. Maybe we're the ones being struck by the truth.